After the summer break, the students return to school and their teacher is eager to hear about their vacation adventures. She stands at the front of the classroom, a warm smile on her face, and says,
"Class, I'd love to hear all about what you did over the break. Let's start with little Johnny."
Little Johnny, a lively and sometimes mischievous student, sits up in his chair. The teacher asks,
"So, Johnny, what did you do over the summer?"
Johnny, with a hint of pride in his voice, replies,
"We visited my grandmother in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania."
The teacher, impressed by Johnny's use of such a complex place name, responds,
"Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania? That sounds like an excellent vocabulary word. Can you tell the class how to spell Punxsutawney?"
Johnny's face suddenly takes on a thoughtful expression. He hesitates, clearly trying to remember the spelling of the long and tricky name. After a moment, he looks up at the teacher with a sheepish grin and says,
"Well, come to think of it, we actually went to Ohio."
She is so excited! It's her first football game! She leaves the refreshment stand and maneuvers her way to her seat with a hot dog, fries, and a large soft drink. As she sits down, she carefully places the cardboard tray in her lap. She is just about to unwrap her foil-covered hot dog when somebody in the stands yells,
"Jane! Jane! Up here!"
She wraps her hot dog back up, sets the tray down in front of her, stands up, and looks around, but doesn't see anybody. She sits back down, puts her tray back in her lap, unwraps the hot dog again, and opens a mustard packet. That's when she hears it again.
"Jane! Jane, we're up here!"
Again, she places everything back on her tray and sets it down on the floor. She stands up and looks around, but again sees nothing. She is starting to get frustrated. She sits back down, eats a French fry, takes a sip of her drink, puts mustard on her hot dog, and is just about to take a bite, when again she hears,
"Jane! Jane! Up here!"
Now she's very frustrated. She quickly sets everything down, stands up, turns around, and yells back,
"My name isn't Jane, it's Susie!"
In a small town, a young man named Billy decides to buy a horse. He finds a local farmer who has a horse for sale and offers to buy it for $250. The farmer agrees to deliver the horse to Billy's house the next day. The following day, the farmer shows up at Billy's doorstep looking a bit sheepish.
"Sorry, son,"
says the farmer,
"but I've got some bad news. The horse has died."
Billy, surprised but calm, responds, "That's okay, just give me my money back." The farmer scratches his head and replies,
"Well, here's the thing. I can't do that. I went and spent it already."
Billy thinks for a moment and then says, "All right, just bring me the dead horse then." The farmer, puzzled, asks,
"What are you going to do with a dead horse?"
Billy grins and says, "I'm going to raffle it off." The farmer laughs and says,
"You can't raffle off a dead horse. Who'd buy a ticket?"
Billy, still smiling, replies, "Sure I can. I just won't tell anyone that the horse is dead." A month later, the farmer sees Billy in town and can't help but ask,
"So, what happened with that dead horse? Did you really raffle it off?"
Billy proudly replies, "Sure did. I sold 500 tickets at $5 each." The farmer, amazed, asks,
"Didn't anyone complain when they found out the horse was dead?"
Billy smiles and says, "Just the guy who won." So I gave him his $5 back. A deaf couple checks into a motel late one night. Upon moving into their assigned room, they go to bed. In the middle of the night, the woman has a headache, so she goes into the bathroom for an aspirin. But she finds none and remembers that the bottle of aspirin is still in the car. Afraid to go out alone at night, she wakes her husband, then asks him to go get the aspirin from the car. The very groggy husband puts on his robe, then toddles wearily outside. He finds the bottle of aspirin in the car's glove compartment. As he gets ready to go back to the room, he realizes something. He can't remember which room was his. He thinks and thinks, then gets an idea. He opens the car door again and honks the horn several times. Within a minute, all the motel's windows lit up. Except one. A very thirsty man walks into a bar and sits down. As he waits to get the bartender's attention, a regular sitting next to him calls out, "I'll have another Waterloo." The bartender nods and quickly prepares a tall, ice-cold drink, handing it over to the regular. Turning to the newcomer, the bartender asks, "And what can I get for you?" The thirsty man, glancing at the refreshing drink in front of the regular, replies eagerly, "I'll have what he's having, a Waterloo." With a nod, the bartender swiftly prepares another tall, ice-cold drink and places it in front of the newcomer. The man grabs the drink with anticipation, takes a long, deep swig, and then immediately spits it out in surprise. "Hey!" he yells loudly. "This is terrible! It tastes just like water!" The regular bar patron turns to the man and says, "That's because it is water." Then he looks over at the bartender and asks, "Right, Lou?" A man from Texas strides into a bar, his cowboy hat slightly tilted and a broad grin on his face. The place is buzzing with conversations and laughter, but he quickly captures everyone's attention when he climbs onto a stool and clears his throat.
Listen up, y'all,
He calls out, his voice booming.
I've got some big news. My wife just gave birth to a typical Texas baby boy. And he weighed in at a whopping 20 pounds.
The bar erupts in cheers and applause. The patrons are amazed at the size of the baby boy. 2 weeks later, the same Texan returns to the bar, his presence immediately recognized by the patrons. As he settles onto a stool, the bartender approaches him with a curious expression.
Hey there, ain't you the father of that 20-pound baby?
Asks the bartender, pouring him a beer.
How much does he weigh now?
The Texan takes a slow, deliberate sip from his beer. He sets the glass down and leans closer to the bartender. With a proud twinkle in his eye, he says,
15 pounds.
The bartender is visibly puzzled.
15 pounds? But he weighed 20 pounds at birth. What happened? Well,
replies the Texan as he takes another sip of his drink.
We had him circumcised.
A man walks into a pet shop carrying a parrot in a cage.
I want to return this bird,
he fumes.
It won't talk.
The owner sighs and replies,
Sir, we guarantee all our parrots will talk, but we can't guarantee when. It's on your sales receipt.
Reluctantly, the man takes the bird home and decides to wait. Every morning, the man stands in front of the cage and asks, Can you talk? But the parrot just stares back at him. Frustrated but determined, he tries everything from playing records of other parrots talking to rewarding the bird with treats for making any sound at all. Weeks go by, but still, the parrot remains silent, just staring back at him. One morning, after yet another fruitless attempt to get the bird to talk, the man loses his temper. He shouts in frustration, Can't you talk, you stupid bird? The parrot, who has been silently observing this whole time, finally opens its mouth, looks the man straight in the eye, and yells,
What? Can you fly?
Gladys is the preacher's wife and accompanies her husband to church each Sunday, always sitting in the front pew, supporting him as he delivers his sermon. She takes pride in being part of the congregation and loves engaging with the church community. One particular Sunday, the preacher is especially passionate and his sermon stretches on longer than usual. The topic is profound, but the congregation, perhaps tired from a long week, starts to struggle with staying alert. Slowly but surely, heads begin to nod and eyes begin to close. By the time the sermon finally concludes, many in the congregation have succumbed to sleep. After the service, always sociable and eager to connect, Gladys decides to mingle with the congregation. She notices one gentleman who looks particularly groggy, his eyes barely open and a sleepy expression on his face. Determined to be friendly and perhaps wake him up a bit, she walks over to him with a warm smile. Extending her hand in greeting, she says cheerfully,
Hello, I'm Gladys Dunn.
The gentleman, still in a bit of a daze and rubbing his eyes, looks up at her and replies with a weary smile,
You're not the only one.